Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Jeff again with some horseback wisdom, and once again, I'm not on the back of a horse, but I wanted to do this video today because I think we're really at a point in America where people need to speak out, and I cranked out one of my old Naval Security Group hats for this video. So. Um, some of you may know that um, my job in the military was I was a cryptologic linguist. So my job was to provide intelligence or to acquire intelligence and translate it and analyze it. And this was during the Cold War, and I speak a couple languages, but mostly Russian, and I can read, write, and speak Russian. And so I was trained by our government to be able to recognize things like subversion, and I got to watch as things occurred around the world. And the thing that's so bizarre is that those are happening here in the United States right now. Um, there is really a concerted effort by not just the Democrats, but primarily the Democrats in Congress and the White House to turn America into a communist nation. And they're doing that because they think that that would place them in a position of ultimate power. Now, they're ignorant because they don't understand that the Bolshevik Revolution didn't produce the power brokers that thought they were going to be there. Uh, Trotsky thought he would be there forever, and he ended up disappearing. And nobody really thought initially that Lenin or Stalin would be the guys to go and take over, and that power would be distributed among among the Politburo and the different regions within the Soviet Union, but that didn't happen. And so our foolish leaders, or well, the people who claim to be leaders in Washington, think that same sort of thing. I believe that if there's a new revolution, that they'll do it the right way and they'll be the ones that are in power. This is a horrible, devilish idea, and I never honestly thought in my lifetime I would see it here in America. But part of the reason I'm talking about this now is there's been several periods throughout history where this sort of thing has been on the cusp, and there were signs that people should have recognized, and many people did recognize, but not enough people spoke out about it or did something about it. Now, we're blessed in America in that we still have an electoral system, at least locally. I don't think very many Americans trust our national electoral system anymore. I'm not talking about the Electoral College. I'm talking about the tabulating of votes for offices of senator, congressman, and president. I don't think very many people in America have confidence in that system. But we still have pretty good confidence in our local gubernatorial and mayoral races and those sort of things. And that's really where our focus needs to be. But to give you some historical examples, prior to the Bolshevik Revolution in the Soviet Union, people came to the Romanov family, they came to the Tsar, and they told him, there are these people, the Bolsheviks are out there, and they're not just a social movement. They're not out there just claiming like AOC is to help people. And by the way, she doesn't know what she's doing either. I've never met her, but I can tell by the things that she says and the way she carries herself that she doesn't really understand. But and this isn't to bash Representative Ocasio-Cortez at all. It's just a statement of my my history and training and understanding of how Bolshevism and that sort of stuff works. Anyway, the Tsar and the Romanov family, who were in charge of a Christian Russia, by the way. If you go back and look at their history with President Roosevelt and his negotiation of the peace between the Sino-Russian War um, parties. They were a Christian nation. So anyway, the Bolsheviks weren't stopped. And the Romanovs said, oh, well, they're just a social movement. And it turned out that they were not a social movement. So they took the Romanov family, they hung and assassinated them. And then that's how we got the story of Anastasia, of her getting away from the Bolsheviks. Well, then fast forward to Germany. And after Hitler, or actually while he's in prison, he writes Mein Kampf, and he gets out and he starts to gather these people and talking about this new national government in Germany. And right about that time, while the Kaiser and other members of the German government were kind of watching him, but not really willing to do anything about it, some retired members of the German military, general staff primarily, flew to England, or went to England, didn't fly, and visited with members of parliament and members of the British intelligence service. And this is prior to Kristallnacht. This is prior to the brown shirt brown shirts really gathering power in Germany. And these generals told the British, hey, this guy Hitler has an idea that's not it's not a social construct. It's not just a maybe an odd or a one-off group think. It's actually a religion. And Nazism is a religion of the man gods and the subhumans. And they told the British this, and the British were like, not really. We see, World War I is over, and it was so terrible. We don't ever want to face the prospect of another war, which is true. But when one forces itself upon you, or when people and organizations start to act in a way that identifies them as having that goal or intent, you better do something about it. If some people move in next door to you and they construct a big fence, and then they start drilling holes in that fence, and you notice the barrels of guns coming out of those holes every now and again, you better do something about that. Otherwise, one day you're going to face a huge issue. And the British decided not to, and then of course Neville Chamberlain and his cowardice and everybody, led to World War II. Well, then we had the Cold War, and the Soviets went into Afghanistan, which we didn't learn from. They lost 50,000 men and a lot of equipment. And, they were in Cuba, and we had this big arms race. And ultimately, under President Reagan, the Soviet Union collapsed. Well, those ideas we brought, as a matter of fact, at post-Soviet Russia, we brought many of those people here, Gorbachev included, who ended up teaching at Stanford, I think, or Berkeley. But many of those people came here and then romanticized the idea of Bolshevism, which we would call communism or socialism. And that romanticized idea that the Bolsheviks had initially when they killed the Romanov family before Stalin and Lenin took over, the collective idea, the nastiness that people allegedly believe Karl Marx was propagating, that seeped into our culture. And we all know that it infiltrated all of our universities. And you had people like Saul Alinsky, who was Barack Obama's mentor, promoting this nonsense. People that lived in these little enclaves, these bubbles, and never did anything for anyone else or served anybody. They created this idea that, well, in America, we could try this experiment again. We could try this socialism, Bolshevism, and it'll work this time. And now we have people in Washington that think that they're smart enough to make it work. The Schumers and the Pelosi's, and I'm not including Biden in this because I don't think he even understands where he's at half the time. But his handlers, people that believe that Karl Marx wasn't such a bad guy because his experiment just wasn't done correctly. Well, Karl Marx was of the devil. He lived in his mother's basement practically and slept on her couch. And like all good communists, Obama and others included, never really did anything and just found their way in power. Which is pretty amazing, you know. And again, not in. I served under President Obama, and actually, as a president, he was okay. But I mean, his ideas were horrible, and because they're anathema to the United States. And now we have these people around the world who are influencing our government, primarily China, in such an amazing way that's so detrimental to America, and that's the reason that these politicians hated President Trump so much. I'm not a big President Trump fan. I hope he doesn't run again because he's so caustic. He has such a divisive spirit. But the reason they hated him was he was pointing out how tied to the Chinese communist Bolshevik idea they are, and they have been. So what do we need to do about all this? Well, if you're a Christian, you need to fight against this as much as you can, not in the physical. The way we fight is on our knees in prayer. We need to be praying for Biden and for Pelosi and for Harris and for Schumer and for all of our politicians, McConnell, all of them. Pray that the Spirit of God will open their eyes. And we need to be active. You need to be active in your local area. You need to vote. If you're not stuck or you're not prohibited from taking part in some local political function, do that. Become a mayor. Become a council person. Get on the board of your library district. But get out and do things. And on a national level, we need to demand election integrity. We need to hold these politicians accountable. And the only way we can do that is in elections. But if we don't do that, I don't think we'll have another legitimate national election in America. I don't think the 2024 election will be legitimate at all. And I'm not even sure the midterms will be legitimate, especially if the way things look as if they're going to go, where the House and the Senate are going to be swept. The Democrats would be swept out. That's what needs to happen. We've got to get rid of these politicians. We've got to vote them out of office. Yes, they'll be retired, and yes, they'll live this life of luxury by taking money from the Chinese, but at least they'll be out of our hair. But folks, if we don't do something, in 20 years, maybe not even 20 years, there won't be a United States. We'll be like a second-rate Canada. Maybe. We might not even be that. So folks, this message is about do something, right? Do something positive in your community. Do something when this I'm in Texas. We're having a vote here coming up in November. Become a poll watcher, become a poll worker, help people. None of that is negative. Don't listen to the garbage the media, well, for goodness sake, don't listen to the media. Tries to tell you about voter suppression and all that nonsense. That's all garbage. Just go out and offer to help people, offer to be at the polls, offer to check IDs so that these communists that are coming from other places, and there are plenty, don't forget, there's a reason that California and New York and Washington and Oregon are the way they are. It's because the people there have voted in politicians to represent them in that way. We don't want that here in Texas. We don't want it in the United States, really. But the only way we're going to fix that is if people who love God, people who follow the standard that was set by the founders of our nation. Of every, by the way, every ethnicity, both genders. The one of the first hero of the Revolutionary War was Crispus Attucks, who was a black man, freed slave. So this whole idea that everything is racist is garbage. There would be no America if there weren't a George Washington. Not just because he led the Revolutionary Army, but he was a scout before that and built all these relationships with the Native Americans. Without them and his ability to map the United States and his ability to develop those relationships, we would not have won the Revolutionary War. We'd still be stuck with the British. So this whole idea that everything is racist is complete garbage. Don't buy it. And America, one last thing, was founded as a God-fearing nation. Yes, many of the founders were deists. They were not evangelical Christians, but they believed that there was a God, who made us and endowed us with rights that can't be taken away by man. But the only way those rights are going to be maintained is if we force them to be maintained in our balloting system, in our electoral system, in our local communities, by teaching the truth. That's it. If we don't do that, there's a colloquialism that goes around that everybody says, which is all it is required for evil to happen is for good people to do nothing. And that's absolutely true. If we don't do something about America, there will not be an America. And you won't be able to sit by and say, oh, well, I wish, because you won't have that opportunity. We are at a very unique place in history. I wish I had a prophetic word for you, but I'm not a prophet. But I will say that America has been a unique nation in world history. And it's been unique for a lot of reasons. One, it's the fastest growing nation in the history of the earth. Less than 300 years, and we became the most powerful nation in the world. It's the most providential nation. Because of America, all of the world has been righted many times. All you got to do is travel. Go to Europe and see how many people love America. Go to China. When I was in China, people loved the fact that I was American. I loved China. Now, it wasn't the way it is now. People everywhere loved America. Why? Because we saved the world several times. Not by ourselves, but we were the primary force. We stopped Togo. We stopped Hitler. We helped put an end to the Cold War. So, folks, it's time to wake up. It's time to get out and do some things. Get out and canvass for your elections. Get out and talk to your neighbors. Develop a plan for your community. If you see people moving into your community from other states, go and meet them. Don't be mean to them and say, hey, we don't want you here. Go say, hey, how's it going? And if they've got some wacky ideas about what it means to be a Texan, you need to straighten them out and say, hey, now let me share with you some of our history and what it means. And do that in every state that you're in. New Hampshire is the live free or die state. They've got the most freedom in the country. Well, if the folks in New Hampshire don't do something pretty soon, then all the people from New York and Connecticut and Delaware are going to move in there and turn that place into a you know what. So anyway, God bless you. Get active. Trust the Lord. Pray. And may you be blessed.